Before we get started, massive thank you to my good pal Biff Weed. He made his own list of predicted matchups for this year, but isn't making his own video, so I'm going to be using his list. Not to say I don't have my own list, it just so happens that he and I are so perfectly in sync whenever the topic is not Carnage vs. Lucy, that every single matchup I add on my list is also on his list, basically. Or turned out to get onto that poll, which I think we can confidently say only 2 episodes are coming from this year. The losing matchups of the ballot could still happen, but they're probably happening for Season 11 instead. Also, I'm scripting this before any reveals we may or may not get at MagFest, so I don't have any idea if anyone made it at the time of recording this. And I'm not including Alex vs. Cole or Bill vs. Discord, because that would be stupid. So we got nothing to go off of for this year, but I think there are a few that really stand out to me as likely, and funnily enough, as I said, they're all listed in Biff's list. To get this started though, this is not my advocation for these episodes, just ones that I think have a chance of happening next year. Even if I dislike a matchup, it can get on here, and even if I like a matchup, it could just not get on here. For instance, my most wanted episode is Destroyer vs. Iris, but it's not happening this year, or ever. So the most obvious one to me at least, is Ash Ketchum vs. Yugi Moto. My voice just fucked up while saying Ash's name, fuck it. With OG Yu-Gi-Oh! Basically never having lost its relevancy in the modern day thanks to Yu-Gi-Oh! Abridged and Duel Links, and the entire franchise continuing onwards with new installments and incarnations in the form of both the anime and TCG/OCG, it's never really felt like Yugi was ever the problem when it came to this matchup's chances. However, recently, Ash Ketchum's story just came to an end, which to me says, this is the prime time, strike while the iron is hot. And ignoring how I feel about certain people's reactions to Ash's conclusion, this is the moment where the iron is hot and primed for the striking. Ash's story has just ended. Yugi hasn't gotten any new media since 2016 really. I know several people working for DB love this matchup, though I don't know if any of the higher up people do, and this has to be one of the biggest requests for the show, most biggest. At least given what I imagine is the age demographic for most of the fan base. Personally, I'd be on board for this simply for Yu-Gi-Oh! And Death Battle, and Lil Karibo playing a Tem. Yu-Gi-Oh! The Abridged series is one of the biggest inspirations for me, and seeing that alongside one of my other biggest inspirations, Death Battle, would just really make my day. Probably my whole week, depending on how good the episode is. I definitely think this is a high chance, though if it did happen I would picture being in the second half because of how much there is to look into for both. And that Ash's story has only just concluded. At the same time, it's not impossible that some people behind the scenes already have some research done and have had for a while and don't need as much time as I think, but who knows. I know how obvious it is that I'm still suffering from the naughty virus. The second big one to me is The Chosen Undead vs. Last Dragonborn. I mean, come on, this is Liam's baby, well, his second baby after Diocard. But it's his baby that hasn't gone off to college and abandoned him to live alone with his wife, whose name is probably Juanita. I feel like with Sauron vs. Lich King, they've shown their willingness to tackle Western fantasy. While technically Dark Souls is a Japanese game, fuck you, it's a game about Western fantasy. Then again, if Westerners make something indistinguishable from anime, where they still arbitrarily decide it's not anime, so maybe this doesn't count as a Western fantasy game by those rules. I don't fucking know. I'm Chinese. I never grew up with pointless distinguishing borders between what is and isn't anime. Regardless, I quite like the matchup, and my biggest issue, which was how much lore would need to be condensed, was proven to be something they're capable of tackling when they did Sauron vs. Lich King. So with a fantastic aesthetic, a really fucking cool vibe, and just so much potential to be super unique amongst what we've gotten as a slower, not anime style flying brick fight and more of a down to earth, except not even remotely down to earth fight, if that makes any sense. I think not only is it quite likely, but it's also something I'd be quite invested in, despite having never played either game. But I mean, I've played I think like 5 hours of Skyrim, but if you know Skyrim, you know that's nothing. So speaking of matchups I think have gotten a huge push from people in Death Battle, Splinter vs. Shifu. I don't have any particular reason to vouch for this beyond that I feel like they're super interested. But I like the matchup, and wait, I said that wouldn't affect, but anyway, shut up. I think it's certainly quite possible, and they might not do it because we have Kung Fu Panda 4 coming in 2024 and not 2023, but that does mean there'll be hype growing for Kung Fu Panda 4 later in the year, which will make it prime time for a second half episode, especially with the Mutant Mayhem movie for TMNT dropping in August. I think it'd be sick. It's also my good mate Huan's most wanted matchup, so even ignoring that Biff and I would be popping off harder than I laughed at Gogeta vs. Vegito, Huan would be fucking hyped too, and he doesn't tend to get super hyped often, so yeah. The last one I was personally confident in, which Biff has not listed here at all, is AntMan vs. Adam. I kinda predicted this every year, so I guess it doesn't really say anything about its likelihood that it's in this video, and this is more about my obsession with bringing up AntMan vs. Adam. But they do Marvel vs. DC all the time, and this is one of the bigger, ironically, matchups they haven't tackled. Other big Marvel vs. DC rivalries they haven't done are Swamp Thing vs. Man Thing, Dormammu vs. Trigon, and I don't fucking know, Batman vs. Deadpool, my favourite. There are, however, 2 matchups listed here that I did not consider confident picks, and I'll go over here too. Ant vs. Luz, I'm assuming it's pronounced. I don't have any strong feelings for. I haven't seen either series, and I don't check out many new cartoons generally. So not because I don't lie, I love cartoons. There's a new Transformers series coming out that I haven't even checked out yet because I guess not in the mood right now, maybe. Nah, but I think this is a case where right now is the best time for them to do it. And if they don't do it now, they might as well not do it at all. Like a Star vs. Steven, where they did it way after the matchup was relevant. Maybe they learned a lesson. They'll do Ant vs. Luz this year. I don't know if I'm pronouncing either of those names correctly. I mean, they seem pretty easy to pronounce, but who fucking knows with names nowadays? I say names nowadays as if I haven't spent a lot of time looking at Welsh names lately, which are old and make no sense. The other one listed here is Boros vs. Battle Beast, which I flip-flop on. I think it's not any more likely than Invincible vs. Gohan. In fact, I think due to how successful the last Invincible episode was, and the relevancy of Gohan both as a beloved character of one of Death Bell's most overused franchise who they will never stop using, and the fact that he was the big star of the latest movie, and that a lot of Death Bell's demographic have fond memories of Gohan's big moment against Cell in the Android saga, combined with Invincible being an easily more recognized name from the show than Battle Beast right now, I'd say Invincible vs. Gohan is much more likely than Boros vs. Battle Beast. However, I can also totally see them doing Boros vs. Battle Beast as well. It's not like One Punch Man isn't relevant to some regard, and I can totally see them going with this as their episode. Though I can also see them doing a Garo episode instead, because he's more relevant right now than Boros, which has a non-zero chance of being Cell for the same reason as I said Gohan could be the opponent for Invincible, and while I do like Garo vs. Cell, please no more Dragon Ball. I'll add another confident pick. I'm going with Bowser vs. Eggman again for this year, because it's just lining up so well. This is a perfect time for it. Last year was a year just all for Sonic. Sonic was fucking everywhere in the latter half of last year. And honestly, all of it. We got Frontiers, we got Prime, we got Sonic 2, and the IDW comics are going strong. Moving into 2023, we have the Frontiers DLC, the rest of Prime, which definitely was not a single season they cut up into parts to release in a way that would extend hype for the show. We got the hype of 2022 overall carrying over into 2023, continued excitement for the third movie that's coming up in 2024, I think, and also the Mario movie coming out, which has everyone hyped for Bowser especially. Combine this with being a matchup that would get a shit ton of views and a good final matchup to rest one of the biggest franchise rivalries of all time, I definitely think this episode has a pretty good chance of happening. Am I going to say with 100% certainty? No, not at all, not with any of these. I don't think that any of them have a 100% chance of happening, of course, but it's definitely not impossible. There is a small part of me that's confident in Archie Knuckles vs. Juggernaut, but I have nothing to back that up beyond a kind of an odd vibe that it has a chance, but it's teetering on the edge of confidence here. Then there's other matchups, and checking Biffweed's spitballing ideas, I guess I'll list them in likelihood order to me. I abandoned this pretty quickly into the script. Gojo vs. Makima. Again, I don't know if that's how it's pronounced. I think generally with how big both Jojo, Kaizo, and Buzzsaw Dude are right now, and how much these two especially get a ton of attention both as a matchup in the Versus-sphere and as a comparison outside of it, this is a pretty likely matchup. I know the protagonist matchup is also popular, but I feel like with how these series are likely going to continue getting more popular, this is the matchup to do now due to Sims who'll watch just for either or and general hype. I don't really care either way, but I do know one guy will be super excited. Cuphead vs. Bendy. I also think this matchup has a chance. The Cuphead show is going strong, and Bendy is still, for better or worse, recognized. And it's a popular matchup. I can see it happening. And this is the point where I stopped caring about listing them in order. I'll just address the other ones quickly. That is listed. Bigfoot vs. Loch Ness is not impossible, but frankly I don't really care about Ape vs. Plesiosaur. Byleth vs. the Traveler is more possible in my head now because they have acknowledged Genshin Impact. I don't really know if I have any hope for Dio vs. Ultron Alternate Universe Edition. I still think Giorno vs. Joker is likely for if they do another JoJo episode, not counting Showtime due to the ballot. Raiden vs. Raiden I've almost never heard of outside of the Versus-sphere, but I don't keep up with Genshin. Rengoku vs. Mirio isn't impossible if they want to ride the Demon Slayer hype train, and neither is Nezuko vs. Alphonse for that matter. But I definitely say that this one is better, and probably more likely, because Hiroaka is currently more in hype than Full Metal Alchemist. Ricky S vs. the Doctor would probably be one they could do whenever, honestly. I kind of hope not with Dracula Santa. I don't really like the matchup at all for either of them. Doesn't have what I want for either. Fucking poor Dracula too, just no chance. Scooby vs. Courage, unironically, if they knew Velma was going to become the internet's punching bag in advance, they might have had a high chance to ride that train, but I don't know. It's still possible, but eh. And Yor vs. Beatrix, I don't know. I don't know how hyped YX Family is right now. I'm not paying any attention to it at all. Usually when everyone talks up a new anime, it gets my hopes up too high, so I just end up disappointed, so I'm going to avoid this until the hype dies down, I think. Now, for my own personal Spitball ideas, it's mostly one that I'm spitballing that I think has a chance. Kaguya vs. Yuach. It's too easy a joke to make, but I genuinely don't know how it's pronounced. I'm going to say Yuach. It's funny, I was going to say I'm going to say it like in a way, but then I forgot the way in which I intended to say it while in the middle of that sentence. With how big Naruto and Bleach are, and the fact that Bleach 1000-Year War, which I think is the Yuach... I swear, I'm not trying to do a joke, I'm just genuinely fumbling the pronunciation here. I think that's the Yuach... I think that's the Bleach villain stuff. Is that arc. That's going to be coming back with more episodes in July of this year. This is one I definitely think has some small chance of happening. I don't personally care, but I think it'd be a fine episode to ride the hype train on for Bleach. Featuring Kaguya... Did I seriously just fuck up pronunciation of Kaguya? Featuring Kaguya as well, who, while being kind of shitty, is going to bring in views from the Naruto name alone. Not to mention, it would be an amazing way to write off the amount of hate the last two Bleach episodes got, with people who will likely hate-watch the episode to see how badly Death Battle will fuck it up. But given the consensus this time is actually the Bleach character wins, and I think Yuak would win this as an episode, it get a whole new wave of attention for people who hate lowballing Naruto, claiming that they lowballed Naruto and getting them in as well to hate on the episode. So it'd just be a fantastic way to capitalize on the idea that there's no such thing as bad publicity. Scatterbrain Ideas, some manner of Dungeons and Dragons episode would be a pleasant surprise, with that film coming out sometime. I can't name any particular matchup though. I guess Bahamut versus Bahamut from Final Fantasy would be interesting. I know there's some people who want Tiamat versus Nicol Bolas from Magic Gathering. I'm not a fan of that one. I fucking adore Nicol Bolas as a character and a villain. He's so good. And I don't really want him against someone I have no interest in, like Tiamat. A Guardians of the Galaxy matchup, which feels both overdue and likely due to Volume 3. Maybe Starla vs. Commander Shepard? Could happen. Or Rocket Raccoon vs. Stitch. They could piss me off and do Starla vs. Han Solo. Please no. There's a new Spider-Man film. You get a new Spider-Man episode, who knows. June 2 is coming out. Luke vs. Paul, if we're lucky. At this point, I've lost interest in this train of thought, and I can't think of much else. There are some possible... So yeah, those are some possible matchups for Season 10 I think can happen. Let's see how many I got right. I don't expect many to be right. Maybe a few? Who knows? We have nothing to go off of. So I'm predicting... The only episodes I predicted right for this season to continue my streak will be Cole vs. Alex and Bill Disco, which I predicted last year. But for the time of making this video, no clue. Who fucking knows? There are some I'm really confident in, some I'm not confident in, but Death Battle could always surprise me. We'll see. I've had to cut out a lot of coughing in the editing for this video, my god. But hey, I wanted to get something out for you guys. My voice is starting to sound closer to normal again. Now that the naughty virus has died down a bit. So, I mean, it comes and goes. You can't help it, but, hope you guys enjoyed what was probably just a bunch of inane rambling with a couple images on screen, because I don't ever need to do, like, elaborate editing right now, but have a good one, everybody. Hope you have a wonderful time.